Hello, everyone, and welcome to Techlore Talks 2. I am recording this intro after we recorded, and today we're going to start off by talking about Facebook dying and how we think about that and how it ties into revenue models of other big tech companies and how that ties into just so many other things and first-party control over platforms. And then what else do we do? uh, Open source
Uh,
projects.
oh yeah, funding,
Yeah, it goes all
investment
over.
into different companies. Yeah.
Yeah, and then VCs, it kind of goes everywhere. This is a really crazy day today. We have learned that more structure can probably be good. So thanks in advance for working with us, and let's go ahead and get started with this crazy week. So today, is Facebook dying, is going to be our main discussion, and we're going to tie this into a lot more broader concepts regarding big tech and just the general business model of the internet nowadays. So for context, it just came out that Facebook's stocks have plunged 14%. This is their lowest point since March 2020. And for a period on Friday, last Friday, that's sunk even lower. Meta, which is the parent owner of Facebook, has lost 61% of its value over the past 12 months, by far the biggest slide among big tech stocks and more than double the drop in the NASDAQ composite. They are now trading just 28 cents above its closing price in March of 2020. And also, they are falling below the lowest since January 2019 when they were dealing with the aftermath of Cambridge Analytica, which was a very massive scandal. So things right now aren't looking for Facebook. And we want to talk today about whether that means they're finally starting to be phased out or if this is just a small divot for them as they start rebranding themselves into something new. And we want to unpack that and tie it into these broader themes. So let's go ahead and start with, why do you think Facebook is doing so poorly right now? And this is a big question, so this is probably going to go on for a while.
Definitely a big question. Um, Part of it is for sure the rebranding that you mentioned. I think they kind of have a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, as they like expand into this metaverse vision that Zuckerberg has that uh, we're not really sure what that is going to end up looking like yet, but
It's a huge
early
gamble.
signs. Yeah, it's a huge gamble for sure, and he's basically gone 100% in with the rebranding with his whole company. And I don't know if it's paying off really.
Well, I think either way, they knew there was going to be pushback. If it is going to work out, there's no way they were planning on it working out, at least in the next few years. So I guess it's going to be really hard to see how the metaverse stuff plays out. But you know what? Other companies like Apple are kind of following. Like, I think, did you see some of the leaks slash rumors about them developing something with regarding their own metaverse someday? Like, I don't know. Do you think this is here to stay? Because I hope it doesn't. But
There's definitely been a lot of rumors about Apple entering like the augmented reality space. They've been working a lot on like uh mobile hardware to kind of do that kind of stuff, interacting, adding like virtual components to the real world. I don't know if they're focusing quite as much as on virtual reality that I've seen, but I'm sure it's something that everyone's looking into now that Facebook has made such a big deal about it.
I'm so disinterested in the metaverse. And people I talk to
Yeah,
as well also don't seem interested. The only thing people are interested in is the hype behind it. It's that a massive company like Facebook is now talking about this new exciting technology that isn't even here yet. And for me, that screams desperation move, because
hmm,
if Facebook was secure enough in themselves and their finances and their upcoming future, they wouldn't need to resort to such an extreme rebranding and such an
right.
extreme bet for something they don't even know is going to work out. So I think it might work out for them, but for me, it doesn't seem like a move that a company that was in a good position would ever make.
For sure. And I think for sure that they're not very confident in their own primary business of Facebook. They haven't been for quite some time. I think their focus on Instagram, like for the past at least 5 years, has shown that they they know that Facebook itself is dying, and they're trying to branch out as much as they can into any sector they think is going to take off.
I also think another layer to this, aside from just the whole rebranding, is there's no evolution for Facebook.
Hmm.
And this ties into exactly this, is that the Facebook platform gets what some UI changes here and there, but it's fundamentally still the same platform it has been for the last 10 plus years.
Right.
And it's I know it's a meme at this point, but really only old people use Facebook.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people have Facebook accounts That we know and we can verify. But everyone I talk to doesn't seem to like Facebook.
Yeah,
Um,
most people I talk to, it's mostly like catching up with family, um,
Older people who use
older people in
Facebook,
their lives,
and then
right?
once
Yeah.
they're gone, then who's going to use Facebook still? Do you think the scandals and all of that stuff has any impact? Like, do you think there's any realistic impact on their users?
Have there been any major scandals lately? I'm trying to think of any.
I
Like
mean,
since Cambridge Analytica, I'm just trying to.
it depends how major. Not any of them that put them back in court, but like I think there's been several
Right,
data breaches since then. Facebook is
sure.
constantly going through scandals.
I mean, yeah, constantly. It's a huge problem for them. But I think, I mean, the Cambridge Analytica thing, I think, is probably if people weren't interested in like Facebook's approach to privacy before, I think that's where most people probably started talking about it. At least that's when I started hearing about Facebook privacy problems like in the real world from people that I know. It's not just stuff that I was reading online around when that started happening. Like that kind of got the attention of people who might not have noticed Facebook's privacy problems in the past. So I think it's definitely having an impact. Their continued problems since then are more people are paying attention, is what I think.
Got it. But not still not taking action.
Maybe not taking action.
Do you think that the fact that Facebook is publicly traded, I think I already know your answer to this. I know my answer to this. But do you think that the fact that it's a publicly traded company is part of the reason why Facebook is such a terrible platform? Do you think that the pressure for growth and constant need to please shareholders is a cause of a lot of their problems?
I think that definitely plays a part into it. Like when you're a publicly traded company, like you have to go after growth and profit above all other things. So that makes you make decisions that you might not otherwise agree with. But I also think that Facebook is worse in pretty much every aspect than like any other even major big tech company that I can think of. And I think part of that is like an internal culture as well that's driving these privacy issues. I think that they fundamentally don't actually care about any of these things. And that drives this problem as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nothing that they do, none of their actions align with their words. And we see this time and time again. It's almost like every few months there's a huge issue at Facebook. And I think at this point it is very safe to say what you're saying, where like
Hmm.
they genuinely do not seem to care about any of this. And I guess people might say the same about Apple, but like it's a whole different extreme. Like yes, Apple doesn't have end-to-end encrypted backups on iCloud. Yeah, that sucks. That we all wish they had that,
Hmm.
but Apple also doesn't do anything near as invasive as Facebook in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could get into a whole. I don't want this to become the Apple shilling podcast, Henry. That would be not great. But I mean, if I was thinking about Apple, I think that's an entirely different problem. I think with Apple being a publicly traded company, that's probably more of a factor than it is for Facebook. I think Facebook doesn't care internally. I think they internally have a desire to do these things because they think it'll be beneficial for them. Whereas I think Apple, in more cases, is forced into doing things because of external pressures. I think like government oversight and stockholders are more of a factor
Yeah,
in terms of like limiting them. Like the end-to-end encrypted thing, we know that Apple was working on it. That was something that was brought up inside the company and was developed, but there were external pressures that made them back down on it, which still isn't okay. I mean, if they really wanted to, they could have stuck with it, and they didn't. But um,
I agree.
it's just different forces are guiding these companies' decisions.
It's interesting. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. And also, same thing. People are complaining about Apple removing apps and having different policies in China, and it's like, well, they have to do that because they're a publicly traded company, and if they exclude the huge population in China, then they're going to miss out on a huge amount of money from that population.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't see it that way. That's pretty cool. Well, I think this also, now that we're starting to talk about other big tech companies, there's another article that came out, and this was on Yahoo Finance, and it talks about how there are other tech companies who are pretty much so the two main players in the digital advertising space, which is how a lot of these big tech companies have um, it's how a lot of these big tech companies make money. We'll talk about which ones have and haven't had to do that and which ones are hoping to do that in just a second. But Google and Meta have notoriously been at the top of the game. But this Yahoo Finance article pretty much says that they are starting to lose the huge cut of the pie that they have. TikTok is their biggest competitor right now. So TikTok has made a huge impact on this entire industry. But it's not just TikTok. Lots of familiar names are going to come up. Microsoft also wants to enter the digital advertising space, and this is a big one. Amazon wants to as well. And Apple is the other big name that's been trying to get into this. We talked about this, not here on Techlore Talks, but I know in Surveillance Support. And a lot of people saw this article, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, about how Apple is now trying to increase the amount of digital advertising they do. And so it seems like this is where the money is at, but they're starting to really invade the Meta and Alphabet, the parent company of Google's, control over this. So why do you think that people are heading this direction?
Well, I mean, for these big platforms, having having an advertising platform that's on their own and not reliant on another big tech company's platform is obviously a much more lucrative deal. Because the advertising space has the same problem that like developers have with the App Store. These advertising companies take a big cut of that money. These platforms obviously want to take that cut for themselves.
Here, I'm going to chime in. So we just went on a big side tangent because we didn't actually know how TikTok advertisements work. So we're going to re-enter now. TikTok does have ads, and we're now continuing this discussion right now. So what did you just ask?
I said it
Snapchat.
seems similar. TikTok's platform seems similar to Snapchat in that like there are some advertisements on the platform, um, but really nothing that interacts with the creators that much. I was kind of wondering how.
They don't really pay creators. So with TikTok, it's kind of like how YouTube does YouTube Shorts, I'm fairly certain. So yes, TikTok creators can have their own sponsorship deals and all that, which is probably how they mostly make money. But as far as I know, TikTok pays like almost nothing to creators. It's like an embarrassing amount. It's almost nothing.
I guess that's what I was wondering though, like how much sponsorships play into it because I think that like a lot of people can be full-time TikTokers.
Then that
Like
has to
like
be
it
from
like
sponsorships then.
like it can be like a huge revenue stream for people and TikTok doesn't seem to do that themselves. So is that just directly between brands and
I
creators
assume
that
so.
that's happening?
I mean, even YouTube pays creators through their ad program a lot more than TikTok does. And even YouTube, it is so hard to go full time from just advertising alone on YouTube. You probably have to be raking in like hundreds of thousands of views a month to go full
Right.
time. And same TikTok's gonna be even worse. So it has to
I
be.
guess ultimately what my question is are those like sponsorship deals factoring into this ad revenue? Like are they including
I
that in
doubt it.
advertising spend?
I doubt it. I mean, I don't even know how they get that data because like they don't.
How do you think they get this data? Uh,
But like if a company is sponsoring a TikToker, that wouldn't factor into TikTok's revenue. That's between the company and the creator.
but that would still be advertising spend on the TikTok platform. So,
But that's not TikTok revenue though.
right. But in terms of like market share from like advertising from like brands,
Oh, so you're thinking like
like as far as how much brands are spending on each platform
got it. Okay, I see where you're going now.
rather I don't actually know where I'm going with this topic now. I'm just trying to figure this out.
Okay, so you're just wondering if you're a company and you have a product and you want to advertise, where are you going to put your advertisements?
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really important question when it comes to this because I mean, Google and Facebook make huge amounts of revenue now compared to these other platforms, but if their percentage of what companies are spending is shrinking, even though their revenue isn't right now because the other platforms aren't directly getting that money, it would still represent like pretty big losses in terms of advertising spend, I would think, that
Yeah.
they're losing to other platforms.
No, definitely. That's a really good point. And I think that it adds a lot of pressure on these social networks to have to like that's why there's so much competition between the social networks now, because like they have to earn that advertising spending. If Facebook knows that it's only old people and you have a product that you want to advertise to young people, like you don't want to put money into the advertising on Facebook when you can put the same amount of money on TikTok and get people who are more likely to buy that product.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. This revenue model of advertising is just so invasive in so many ways, not even from a privacy perspective, that it's really hard for me to see how this doesn't end poorly for the end user at the end of the day. And I think it's a good time to talk about Apple, because I
Hmm.
like, if any company of these big tech companies is going to find a way to digitally advertise successfully at scale and be able to actually do it in an effective way, it's and safely, I would put my money on Apple to be able to do that.
Safely in terms of privacy, like user
Yes,
privacy, that kind of
privacy
thing.
not being ultra invasive, not being done in like an ultra competitive manner. Do you have thoughts on that?
Well, Apple's a big one, but I mean, Snapchat and TikTok are the other big like first party platforms that are having advertising as they don't do advertising outside of their platform. Um, I kind of wonder what the privacy implications are of that. I mean, that seems like a better model to me than like Google AdSense, which like tracks you across the entire web, right?
Well, okay, yeah. So we wanted to hold off on this discussion before our call. How do you picture? I guess I picture a few scenarios here. There's the first party scenario, which is what we see nowadays. You know, if you're using
Hmm.
Snapchat, Snapchat has its own ads and it's done through its own stuff. Even companies like Brave, who have like Brave Rewards, that's first party. Like you have to go through Brave and then they start serving your ads. Then there's kind of what Google AdSense is, which is you register for Google AdSense and then you kind of people can supply ads, but it's done through you. But is there any other possible way of doing it which is more like a standard, like a standardized way of running ads that doesn't go through a central company? Is there a reality where that's possible, like some kind of open market, like a Craigslist for advertising that people can integrate with?
In a sense, that is kind of what Google AdSense is. I mean, that's the point, is that you just have these blank spots and you're like, you can advertising to people, you can put ads here, and then people bid on spots, right? That's how the whole model works.
But can we do that model without Google? Is what I'm asking.
Without Google, like in a
Like a like in a
decentralized way?
decentralized way, because like that's what I'm wondering.
No easy solution to that comes to mind. For the problem isn't making money as like a big creator. A lot of people are able to get like sponsorship deals and like they're able to directly build those. A lot of bigger organizations and creators and whoever online are able to get these sponsorship deals and brand deals and build direct connections with people. But like, it's really hard for like a smaller blog or channel to build those relationships. I mean, I can't think of a decentralized and automated way to do it the way that like Google AdSense works. That would be like private and without like a central entity
Got it.
step like a middleman stepping in.
I guess the only thing I can think of is the closest thing I've seen to it is what Brave is trying to do through Bat and all that stuff. It's still done and managed all through Brave, so it's not actually
Right.
in any way decentralized, but at least it's more transparent. And at least I think they're trying to at least outline how it would work, and at least they're trying to reward users in the process. So like that
Yeah.
whole revenue model is interesting to me. I'm not saying it's good, bad. I don't have any kind of opinion on it in that regard. I just think it's interesting how they're trying to at least add a layer of transparency to the current revenue model on the
Yeah.
internet.
Brave is a good example for sure. But it is centralized, like you said. I there's definitely ways that I can imagine to do what Google is doing, um, in a privacy respecting, transparent way. I think Brave is probably one of the closest people to that at the moment that I can think of. But it's but there's no avoiding having a middleman in between all of these transactions that I can think of.
Yeah, at least realistically. I mean, I'm sure people
Hmm.
will be like, just don't regulate it, but then that would be crazy.
I mean,
Um,
I'm sure people would be like, "Oh, there's a blockchain solution."
oh yeah, that'll fix it. That'll fix this problem. It just throw
The blockchain
blockchain,
fixes all problems. Yeah.
an AI blockchain that's run on machine learning. Any other buzzwords to throw at this?
There are definitely like crypto centric ad networks I've seen, like AdSense, but it's like all crypto. So I know that this already exists. I can't speak to the privacy or to any of the finances on that, but it's a thing for sure.
Well, it's funny. When we were talking, it made me realize the importance of the creators in this day and age because the only reason I think that even like YouTube is YouTube is able to serve ads and be so successful, and same with TikTok, is because there's these people that people want to watch and they create their content and there's actually value on the platform. Facebook doesn't provide any value. There is the value is just the networking aspect. You and your friends are chatting, which is in a way no more valuable than you chatting with a friend on Signal. It's just
Right.
Facebook has more features, like you can post photos and it's more for the world to see and it's more interconnected. But there's
Hmm.
inherently no business model for Facebook, which I think is ultimately the problem for the platform, is it requires such an invasive way to survive. Like Facebook, I don't think the reason why Facebook has a bad culture, like we were talking about, is because they never would have even made it this far without having to be that invasive and having to have such a toxic way of making money. Because everyone else has figured out better ways to do it. Apple makes hardware. Google, I guess Google isn't probably the best example, but I think even Google at least has some kind of value that it supplies to people through its tools. And it has other paid revenue models, like companies rely on Google for a lot of different things. Um, Google search is an actual useful tool that people use and rely on. And Google has a tons of things that are actually useful. And Google does have hardware too, even though it's, do they even profit off their hardware? Do you know?
Uh, I I don't know what their numbers are. I would imagine it's not much, but
Yeah.
it seems all of their hardware seems to mostly be a driver for their software, right?
Yeah, that seems to be.
And
Yeah.
they weren't profiting off the Pixelbook, obviously, because they just canceled that. So
I know you're happy about that one.
yeah, it's something.
Then you have Microsoft. They build an operating system that a lot of people use.
Hmm.
Amazon. Like all these things have actual use cases and tools. The only thing Facebook has is like Facebook Marketplace and I guess businesses. Like there's business pages on Facebook, which I hate, by the way. I hate trying to like pull up a restaurant in an area and I click visit website and it takes me to a Facebook page. It doesn't even let me access the damn website.
Microsoft's an interesting one. It's it's interesting how like these older tech companies like Microsoft and Apple in particular um, are like pivoting in real time from like making software that has value to like a services model where they provide um, online services like Google and Facebook do.
Well, I mean, it kind of moves into more of, it's more moving into the subscription model of things too. You know,
Hmm.
everyone's going that direction. I think to Adobe when you bring that up and how Adobe used to have to buy a
Oh,
license, like, and it was at least you own the damn software, but now you can't own anything and you have to spend what $55 a month on their entire suite, and they're just
yep.
giving you this fake service. It's a fake online service, in my opinion. Um,
Adobe's just not good. They should be investigated for an antitrust lawsuit. I mean, honestly, all they've done with all their subscription money is buy all the competitors
I know it's really
to all
bad.
their products. Like just recently they bought Figma for $20 billion. It's like a web app.
Dude, new get rich quick scheme. Just build some crappy Photoshop alternative and just wait for them to offer you $1 billion. They don't even want to
Honestly,
risk it because if anyone does anything, they're screwed.
that is probably a viable startup strategy. So VCs hit me up.
Man.
Uh,
Yeah, Adobe, but same thing with operating systems, right? Like Mac OS, used to have to pay for, right? To
mhm.
upgrade, you used to have to upgrade, and now it's all free. But now Apple has things like the iCloud, like the iCloud. I don't even know iCloud Plus. You know, you're gonna know this.
Yeah, iCloud Plus with their storage, they have a bunch of other services too. I mean, Apple TV Plus is huge now.
All right, so this where this discussion has kind of led me to is like you have all these companies who are trying to find their own revenue models in the way the internet works. And it reminds me a lot of movie streaming as well. How like back in the day, you make a film and the film goes to theaters and then it's anyone can sell the film
Hmm.
anywhere, right? You're at Blockbuster, you're at Redbox, you're at really anywhere. You can go to Walmart and buy the DVD. We're just not seeing that anymore. That physical retail side of it is still there for most movies, but I mean, if there's a Netflix original, you're not going to buy a Netflix original
Yeah.
at Walmart.
Oh, for sure.
Like, so it's kind of the same issue of all these companies are trying to pretty much control and centralize everything on their own platform. And I think that actually creates a lot of these problems, not just in the digital advertising and privacy space, but just globally. I don't know if there's anything to unpack from that. It's just not a connection I've ever made that this digital advertising problem is not unique to us.
Burst a hole in your story, but I think Netflix sells DVDs, don't they? Like, I'm pretty sure you can get it's like Stranger
This,
Things on like a DVD set.
yes, but I think, okay, you're right. But like, what about Netflix original movie?
I can't think of any good ones. Oh no.
Here, 2020 best Netflix original movie.
Why can't I think of a single good Netflix original movie?
Because they're meant to just be
What is
forgettable.
wrong?
Just best Netflix original movies of 2020. Okay, American. Okay, the Trial of the Chicago Seven.
Ooh, I might have watched that. I think that was good.
Even if they do sell the DVDs, I still think the ultimate goal is to get people on
Yeah. Yeah, the idea
Netflix.
behind all of these like
Yeah,
originals is to lock people into streaming platforms, which is why people are getting sick of streaming
yeah,
platforms.
yeah, because you have to buy every freaking streaming platform and not like you have to like spread yourself thin across all these platforms. You might as well
Right.
just buy TV
Right.
at this point. Yeah, I can't find the Trial of Chicago 7 DVD
Yeah,
on
I suspect that
Amazon.com.
very few Netflix movies are, but I know there were some really big Netflix movies now that I'm thinking about it. I think there were like some Oscar nominated movies a few years ago, like Marriage Story, I think, and I'm pretty sure those were released on DVDs. But I would imagine most.
Hmm.
I mean, there are a ton of Netflix original movies, and they're all. It, most of them seem like filler content to me.
Well, see, so Stranger Things is on Amazon, which is
Hmm.
to be expected. So I think it could be a
Yeah,
popularity thing. If something's popular enough and they think they can profit off of selling physical copies, or like if it's worth leaving the platform because it's good enough that it might bring people in. Maybe it's some kind of like business decision on what they want to let people see and what they can't. Similar to how Facebook doesn't think it's useful for people to be able to access business information without having a
right.
Facebook account. I'm sure internally they were like, it's not worth it for us to let people just see a business's address on Facebook without needing a Facebook account. Just to avoid getting too off topic, let's kind of get back into the swing of things. What we originally wanted to tie this into was all these different revenue models, and I think so far we've done a good job of just summarizing some of our thoughts and problems with things. But the main story that I wanted to tie this to and kind of tie this more into the privacy space is we covered this in surveillance report, but it was the cookie extension that was recently acquired by Avast. And this cookie extension, what it does is it pretty much takes care of most of the cookie banners that you see on websites. They were completely acquired by Avast, and this kind of ties back into a big history of lots of services. Was it Canine Mail that was acquired by Mozilla,
Yes, it was acquired by
I believe?
Thunderbird. That's correct.
And then there was it Canine or was there another open source project? There was another open source project recently that also got, or at least they were threatening to quit. Was it the Canine? I think it was the Canine developer. He originally threatened to quit, and he shut down the project.
No, I'll look it up. Fairmail.
Fairmail.
Yes.
No, it's not Fair. Was it? Okay. So yeah, the Fairmail developer, out of nowhere, is just like, screw this. I'm done. I'm making no money out of this. And I think they are back now
I believe
after
so, yeah. I don't know
people.
exactly how that resolved, but as far as I know, they went back to working on it. They figured something out.
Yeah, but it's just really sad because I think it really. I know on Techlore we've made videos about this and we talk about this quite a bit, but open source projects inherently have no business model.
Yeah. Hmm.
A lot of them, like fair email, there is no business model. You download the app, you use the app. There's no service they're supplying to you. It's not like there's any cloud anything. It's just an app you download. And so it's really sad. And I think we have to start thinking of ways to help open source projects because the donation system just doesn't work. I think it's good for keeping things on its feet, but like there's no way anything like fair email will ever go against the Gmail app when Gmail has a super invasive business model that we've been talking about this entire podcast. And so I think, and this is super optimistic. There's probably no easy solution to this, but I don't know if there's anything already that you have.
No, that's always been a tricky problem for open source projects because um, there's a lot of like idealists, especially in the open source community. Um, and when you try to bring the business side of things into it, which is important, people get angry about it, and oftentimes to do it effectively, like if you want to build a real big business, because there are gigantic businesses that are built on open source, you have to like limit your product in a lot of different ways, even though you're technically open source that people don't um, necessarily like. Um, there's a bunch of projects like this. I can think of like GitLab as a good example, which has like a an open source core platform, but then they have a lot of proprietary. Or in GitLab's case, I think it's still open, but it's like ad paid add-ons to their platform for the enterprise.
Well, the services that have it lucky are the services that provide an ongoing service. Something like Proton. Like with Proton, you're paying for an
Hmm.
ongoing service. They're actually managing your emails. It's not just a software you bought in this case in open source terms is just downloaded, but like it's not something that you just downloaded and now you use. It's not like an open source game that you just download and play. It's the best way actually to tie this to gaming. It's the difference between an offline single player game that you just play by yourself and an
Yep,
online game. When you're playing an online game, you're paying for the hosting, you're paying for the servers, you're paying for that online connectivity, which makes sense to pay for, and that's that ongoing subscription type of model that we're talking about Apple doing and moving towards. But it's really hard for a lot of open source projects to do that. And then sometimes you have like the lucky projects, like you have the Calyx Institute, who probably makes no money from
hmm,
developing Calyx OS, but they happen to have this whole other business revenue model that they use
right.
to just fund that. So is that the solution if you want to have a successful open source project that makes money? Because by the way, what you're saying is so true. I absolutely hate how the privacy community cringes the moment anyone tries to make money in this space because it's just the reality of how the world works right now.
Right.
I hate it, but like we have to be real about this too. If people can't pay for food, if people can't pay for just a basic quality of life, they're not going to be able to build as many cool things. They're not going to have the time. They're going to burn out quicker. They can't justify doing things. You're going to get all these developers who just want to quit, which happens all the time in the open source
Absolutely.
world.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's just really sad, and I don't think there is an easy solution for this.
Yeah, I mean, outside of like you said, inherently online like services like Proton Mail, it's tricky because you can't exactly do like the Adobe model of doing the subscription but not actually doing any of the service stuff.
I mean, you can if you just happen to be in that luxurious place where you just offer a
You
fake service
can.
to people and offer a cloud storage a dish on top of it that's
You
totally
can, but it's
useless.
it's harder in the open source community. And I know there's some open source projects that like charge for official builds, that kind of thing, or like they like have yearly subscriptions. But those aren't too popular as far as I can tell. The one that was coming to mind was GPG Mail for Mac OS. Like if you want GPG and like the mail extension to like built into the Mac OS email client, that's like a paid download basically, and it's an open source project. But you can't like distribute builds using the name of it or anything like that. Like on your own, you can't. it's part of their license, so you have to like get the builds, fund them, or build it yourself without using any of their trademarks, basically. So a lot of, I guess, a lot of companies that do that end up relying on like trademark law to like prevent people from distributing their app with their branding, basically.
This reminds me a lot of Strongbox,
Yeah,
like the password manager. Strongbox, open source, but I mean, you can download it for free, but it's kind of like it's got the free tier, but I pay for it because I
hmm.
like the paid features.
Did we talk a lot
Okay.
about the Avast stuff? Just briefly mentioned it. I don't know if
No,
we want to
so
go into anything more.
yeah. Well, I mean, back into that. Do you think that a big company buying out a project like that is a bad thing?
I guess it kind of depends. I don't know what Avast's goals are. I'm not exactly sure why they would buy this product. Honestly, it doesn't make any business sense to me because the extension just closes cookie pop-ups, and I don't know what that has to do with Avast's
Yeah.
business model.
Yeah, and also I don't think there's anything proprietary about what this extension
Yeah,
does. Like I'm pretty sure Avast could just roll out its
I
own
feel like they definitely
functionality
could.
that would hide
And there's
cookies.
like other apps that I think are even open source that do this already,
uBlock does
right?
this with a filter.
So with this one in particular, it's kind of confusing. There are there are times that it is a problem. I'm thinking of like I guess this wasn't open source, but when Zoom bought Keybase and then nobody used Keybase anymore, remember that? That was a problem. And that was
Yes,
a problem
yes.
because Zoom, well, the main problem was because Zoom bought Keybase basically just to take all of their developers that were working on encryption to work on Zoom encryption instead of Keybase. It was just an easy way to hire like however many people they needed to add security to their service. So acquisitions like that in the software space are more problematic because they kind of leave the original product abandoned, basically. I don't know what Avast is doing here though.
They just wanted to
Um,
hire this guy. They're like, "We need you to build us an
maybe.
extension
And
because we don't know how to
but
do
if
it."
that's the case, like that would be not good because that means he's not working on this open source project anymore. He's working on some Avast thing somewhere and it's not really benefiting a lot of people anymore.
That's a good point. Well, how do you feel about funding? So I know that you wrote that article when you were still with Privacy Tools about StartPage back in the day when StartPage was acquired, partially acquired slash acquired
Right.
by System One. This also reminds me of Bitwarden recently just got that. Was it
It was,
$100 million?
yeah, it was something like that. I
$100 million
mean, it's
in
no
funding.
Adobe acquisition money, but it's still,
But like, how do you feel about those? I think those are also. I mean, StartPage, I think was like absolutely crushed by the privacy
Start
community
Page.
when the System 1 stuff came out.
Start Page was, I think, it was seen as more of a problem immediately because System 1 is part of the advertising industry. To me, like System 1, like their core business is fundamentally the same to me as like Google AdSense. It's connecting advertisers with um, publishers, basically. And well, they're probably not as privacy invasive. It's probably not like automated like AdSense is with tracking people and stuff like that. It's just a similar enough business model that people are what Google has done is made people wary of all advertising companies basically is what the main problem was. And I mean ultimately I don't think that the System 1 acquisition was much of a big deal. I mean we ended up relisting start page after a lot of discussions with them. They did like an AMA, and we emailed them about the System 1 acquisition, and it didn't seem that bad um, because Start Page has an advertising model. So obviously, it makes sense for an advertising company to acquire them, but they have an advertising model that is privacy protecting. It's the same as like DuckDuckGo. I think we were talking about this earlier, where it's entirely like based on your searches. It's just very context aware. Like if you search for something, it gives you an ad for that thing basically. It doesn't
There,
require tracking you in keeping track of your preferences and your past interests or anything like that. Um, so like that from a privacy perspective, I don't think was a big deal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think the other thing too is that there was value because people were like, well, what's the value in this acquisition? And like the value is they have a
Hmm.
stake in the company. If the company makes more money, then they make more money. Like it's pretty obvious. They don't even need to do anything with the company. As long as they put money into it and they have stake in the company, then they get money out of it. As long as the company
Absolutely.
continues
And
to
in
do well.
Startpage, yeah, Startpage has a viable business model in advertising that's privacy protecting. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah. So how do you feel about Bitwarden then?
Right.
Bitwarden is more so just like
Yeah,
here's funding.
that's an entirely different problem because, as far as I know, I don't think the people that were investing in Bitwarden have anything to do with anything that Bitwarden does. Like System One is in the same industry, right? But I think this is, oh, yeah, yeah. I think it was just like
VCs.
general VCs, investment companies that are like betting on Bitwarden uh, to be successful, which is different, I think, than what happened with Startpage. But it's really hard to tell what's going to happen with Bitwarden, because we kind of only have what's in that post, their agreements. They say that they're going to continue, but we know, like historically, a lot of VC funded companies don't follow through with the promises they make when they get funding originally. Um, and depending on how much control this investment company has over Bitwarden, that could definitely impact the direction that they go in, one way or another.
And I think this exposes another problem with the lack of revenue models in the open source world. If you are someone who's like, oh, we shouldn't have to pay for things, um, money
Hmm.
does talk in this day and age, and the people who are going to be able to put money into these projects um, might have influence on them. Who knows? Maybe if Bitwarden charged, what do they charge, like $10 a year for their plan or something crazy like that? It's like
Yeah,
twelve
it's
dollars
not
a year.
that much.
It's something like that. But like, what if Bitwarden charged twice as much? I'm just making
Hmm.
up numbers here. If Bitwarden charged twice as much, but they got to remain independent, I would argue that that's a better situation for the world than even like bringing VCs into it at
Sure.
all. But like, we would have to like all as a community agree to spend twice as much on Bitwarden, or maybe everyone who's on free plans would have to now pay 50 cents a month for their passwords
But
to be
people
stored in
might.
the
I
cloud.
mean, $10 a year is a really generous deal on Bitwarden's end, I think. They could easily charge like
It
three
is.
times that, realistically. I
Yeah,
mean,
they could.
one password charges $60 a year, I think.
Either way, this point stands. Like the Bitwarden deal is just
Yeah.
incredibly good. Um, yeah, and I think what I'm trying to get at is if if we're not paying for something, generally speaking, again, there's always going to be exceptions, but if we're not paying for it,
Hmm.
someone is, and there's a loss of power that comes along with that. That I think people don't realize. When we're not paying for it, we lose some power and we lose say because in this world, whoever's paying the bills does have power. You know, that's why when you're a kid, like you can't go to a movie with your friends because you need to somehow find money to go see the movie. The people who have money are like dictating what you can and can't do with things. And so if you're Bitwarden and your customers are asking for a feature, but the VCs are asking not to have that feature, and the VCs are the ones paying the bills, you know, they're going to be stuck in a position where they're even having to think about what's best for themselves rather than what's
Yeah.
best for the customers. But in the perfect world, what's best for the customers is also what's best for the company, and there's just been a significant
And
mismatch
it might not even be
of
that
that.
VCs like are against features that customers want, but if the investment company's prioritizing features like on the business end of things that don't matter to consumers at all, the consumer side of things is going to be left undeveloped, right? And it's just going to kind of go stale. That's what we've seen from some projects that decide to focus on the enterprise in the past. It's really hard to say with Bitwarden because I don't know too much about their like financial situation before this investment. Like how much are they making in revenue? Because ultimately, all of these investments, the investors are putting in this money and they're going to expect to get that money back. And I don't know if, like right now as it stands, Bitwarden is on track to pay any of that back because I don't know how much they make. And if they're not on track, then they're gonna have to make some big changes to their product or their business model to recoup that investment.
That's just so much
There's a lot
money.
of money floating around in the tech world,
The
VC
VC
world.
world.
Time to time to make an
Wow.
app. So when is
Well,
Plexus accepting VC investments?
I mean, it's just really hard to tell, like, I guess where everything's gonna head because I don't see it heading in a good direction. I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better with all this stuff. Um, the sad thing is, I think the beautiful thing about the internet is everything is just easily accessible to you, but the whole free model of the internet has enabled so many of these awful industries to come up, and so many of I don't know. I just think that I think the internet would be a better place in some ways if it was paid for, at least in some places. But then you get into the argument of like you have to pay to access information, and some people can pay more for that information, some people
Yeah,
can't. So everything's just a massive double-edged sword, and there's no winning. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
that is really it's really tricky.
Before we start wrapping this up, because this discussion has been very all over the place, and as we're doing this, we've had to cut a few times, and we've also learned quite a few things in this recording. Because the first recording was a lot more structured, because we could just cover iOS 16 updates, and this one was more like very, very free form. And I think this is probably too free form, at least for this topic, because this topic I think needed some more structure to keep things on task. So hopefully the edit isn't as crazy as the actual
Yeah,
recording.
I'm sure it'll all come together.
Yeah. Either way, I hope there was some value there. And again, sorry about that, but hopefully going forward, we'll add some more structure to this so we can keep things a little bit more on track and have a better discussion that kind of carries on throughout the whole thing. But to kind of finish this out, because we did talk about Facebook at the beginning of this. Um,
Oh yeah,
yeah, that's
that long ago,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, like what, like 40 minutes ago? um,
Yeah, a bit longer than that.
my optimistic side wants to think that Facebook is really desperate and they're dying, and they might make it out. Like maybe their metaverse thing will pan out perfectly for them, and they executed this perfectly. But I don't know if they will, and I really
Yeah,
like to believe that they're on their way out of the world, or at least of being a top dog, and they might just slowly start fizzling out. Kind of like Mike. I see Facebook becoming like Microsoft. Like they used to be a big name, and then they kind of just disappear into like number 5 to 10 companies that people still know about, but they're just kind of doing things on the side.
maybe. I think Microsoft has kind of reinvented themselves though.
They
Like they're on
have.
the up and up for sure. I mean, if you think back to like the Windows 8 era of Microsoft, it was pretty dire for them. But they're growing in a lot of different segments now. So
Yeah, I agree.
I was
So
kind of off topic. I was just thinking the other day, like, am I gonna be like a boomer about VR? Is this like gonna be the thing that I don't get just because I'm older than it, and like all of the kids are gonna be into VR, and I'll never understand it? I was,
well, I think okay, I get VR. I think we both get VR,
I, I
but the
I
metaverse is beyond
understand
that.
VR.
And
Is it though?
I don't know. Like, I mean, it is virtual reality, but like the concept of the metaverse is like the socialization and like but you're right though. This is like no different than like VR chat.
Yeah,
And like I watch people do VR chat, I'm like I just don't get it.
right. That's
So,
exactly my feeling about anything related to the metaverse. But does this make sense to some people?
I think it does. I mean, we have
I'm wondering,
certain
like,
people in
when
our
I've,
Discord server who play this a lot.
yeah, that's true. When I'm in my 30s, is this going to be like a commonplace thing, and I'm going to seem like I don't know what I'm doing because I'm not in the metaverse all the time? I don't know.
I don't know. It really does scare me though because we already are so disconnected from even ourselves on an individual level. I don't think we've ever been more disconnected to ourselves. And even though we are so connected in social media, we're also so disconnected from each other at the same time. And this is only going to make all of that worse.
Oh yeah,
That is
absolutely.
like, and that is an objective fact. And that, like, no matter like how you think about it, the whole concept of the metaverse and the whole concept of hanging out with people in this virtual world that's not real, and things not being tangible and things not being real is only going to make these things worse, and I do not like that. And so if this does become the future, it is gonna be a tough time for me because I'm probably not gonna want to be a part of it for a very long time until I really need to. And I feel like that's what people said about like Facebook, like old people. Now they're
Yeah,
on it, and they're the remainers.
exactly. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else to add? If not, we can just end it there.
Cool. I think I've wrapped up everything I want to say.
All right. Well, thanks everyone again for listening. Sorry again, this was very kind of just all over the place. We wanted to kind of try the freeform discussion again this week, and well, we learned it's the second episode, so we learned that it's probably a little too freeform for at least things that are a little bit more broad and nuanced, and we can take in multiple directions because then it just kind of goes nowhere. But I think there were some like little gold nuggets here and there that might have helped some people. So thank you all for
Hopefully.
watching. Next week will probably be better. Thank you, Jonah. Yeah.
Yep.